You're dreading having a conversation that you know you need to have, and I can guarantee you that the dread that you're feeling right now is 10 times worse than how it will feel once you're actually in the conversation. That being said, I know the dread is real, and I have been in that situation one too many times. I'm gonna give you my tips and tricks on how to prepare for this conversation so that you can communicate like a baddie, so that they don't even realize that you're nervous when you're having the conversation. When I was growing up, the challenging conversations that I was having were always with my parents, trying to get them to let you sleep over or get them to let you do this volleyball camp. You're always trying to persuade the people who are in authority, which at that point in time were my parents. And for some reason, I always felt so much more empowered writing something out and communicating that way. So I would write my parents these long letters and send it to them or give it to them. And looking back on that, I'm like, oh, it's not that I was just weird in that I was a better written communicator than I was a verbal communicator, but all of us are able to organize our thoughts and position them more persuasively when we write them down first. But I will say that what started as me writing letters to my parents became a process that I've always kind of used, not just in professional conversations, but even in really difficult personal conversations in my life. I will always follow the process that I'm about to talk through right now. I literally did this yesterday with a conversation with someone at work. First things first, and always think about what your objective is. An example objective is to explain to my significant other where I was coming from during a fight that we had yesterday. I want to use this next communication with them to help them understand where I was coming from. That's an example of an objective. Another example of an objective is I want to communicate to my employer why I deserve a raise and a promotion. I want to talk to my parents about why I deserve to go to this summer camp or why I deserve to move out of the house and get my own place. If you notice the common thread in any of these three examples, there is an element of persuasion and negotiation, if you will. Even with your significant other, there's an element of persuasion. You are trying to get something from them. You're trying to get them to see where you're coming from. So what I want you to do is, whether you do this in a notes app in your phone, I like to write things down because it just feels more safe for me for some reason. List out what the objective is. Keep it at one thing, okay? Like, you need to keep it simple. There's that whole keep it simple, stupid, KISS acronym. Like, that is going to be a recurring thread through this whole video. Is the more simple that you can keep it, the much higher your chances are of actually getting through to that person. So if you want your partner to understand where you are coming from, but then you also want them to take you on more dates in the future, and then from there you also want more quality time, like, let's just focus on one thing for this conversation. Practice with this conversation, and then take these little tips and tricks and apply them to all the things that you want moving forward, okay? Keep it simple, stupid. The next thing that I want you to do, and I will say, this is one that I wish I knew before. I just learned this in a podcast I was listening to the other day, literally right before I was having that difficult conversation that I told you about. And it was with your rich BFF. And she basically talked about how there's this acronym that she learned when she was in sales. And the acronym is WIIFM, which stands for What's in It For Me. So we've already listed what our objective is, right? What is in it for the other person, though? You need to have a clear understanding of that. You will not get what you want in life if you don't understand how to frame what you want in a way that accomplishes what that person wants. So let's run it back with the examples that we just gave. With your partner, what is in it for them? A more harmonious household, a more harmonious relationship. Yes, we can say something like to make you feel loved, but like, there needs to also, people are selfish at the end of the day. Why do they want to make you feel loved? So that you can also make them feel loved, so that you can also want to do things for them. Everything is a negotiation. And if you've known me for longer than 2 minutes, you know that that's like one of my core beliefs. Everything is a negotiation. So what is in it for your partner to hear you out? What is in it for your parents to let you go to this summer camp? Yes, even your parents who should be selfless and just want to do everything for you. Like, what is it about what they want for you that you can align your desires with to persuade them to pay for this thing that you're trying to go to, or to let you move out of the house? What is in it for them? Perhaps what is in it for them is you learning the independence of being on your own, and you being able to gain the skills that you would need to be a thriving adult and not constantly be sheltered by your parents and dependent on your parents. Those are two examples. What's in it for your boss to give you a promotion and a raise? Keeping you at this job. Your job satisfaction, which is extremely important to them. You're gonna write that down. Now, you're never gonna explicitly call that out in the call, because then you just seem like you're trying to manipulate them, and you don't want them to know that. And before you get mad at that, what is the definition of manipulation? The exercise of harmful influence over others. Okay, then I would say persuasion is not manipulation. I would say that to be manipulative, you need to be persuasive, but to be persuasive doesn't mean that you need to also be manipulative. In order to skillfully influence others, you need to be persuasive. However, to do that in a harmful way would cross the line from persuasion into manipulation. So I just want to make that clear. Like, you're not trying to manipulate this person. You're not trying to harm them at all. In fact, you are trying to align your personal interests with theirs. And to be honest, that's a very considerate, not self-centered way of looking. Because if you were to just be kind of like basic with your communication, then you would just be entering this conversation through the mindset of your objective. That first thing that I had you write down. Your objective is selfish, just like we all are. And you're taking someone's time, yes, even your parent, even your spouse, and getting them to consider doing something that you want. It is a very selfish thing to do, to only consider what you get out of that. You should also consider how that makes their life better and how that makes their efforts worthwhile. It's one thing to get what you want from people and feel like you're taking it. It's another thing to be able to get people to gladly give you the thing that you're asking for. So just keep that in mind. So at this point in time, on this little paper or notes section, you have your objective, you have the WIIFM, what's in it for me, or in this case, them. You know what you want, and you know what they potentially want. And from there, with that understanding, the approach that I have taken 110% of the time for every difficult conversation I've ever had is to write down 2 to 3 points that I would like to make. Keep these simple, stupid. Like, I cannot stress this enough. These need to be able to fit on a Post-it note. Like, you literally need to be able to fit everything that you want to say on something like this. And don't be trying to write really, really small to cheat the system, okay? In normal font, in normal handwriting, 1, 2, and if it needs a third point, then add a third point. You don't always need that third point, okay? So don't feel the need to jam-pack your conversation with more, because more is not always more. Sometimes more is less, and sometimes less is more. So that being said, these 2 things that you had written at the top of your page, you're never going to explicitly come out and say, I know that what you really want is for me to keep this job. I do not recommend that you explicitly say that. However, you can use your understanding of what they want to inform the way that you write out these 3 points or 2 points. So you're gonna list in any order right now the things that you wanna make sure to hit on. One of the things, if you're talking to your spouse, let's go with that example, is that you acknowledge all of the effort that they put into this relationship, and you know that they want you to feel loved. Maybe that's 1 point. So let's take the parents example. 1 point that you could use when it comes to this whole, like, you're trying to move out of the house, let's say, is that because they've raised you with such great values and morals, you believe you are worthy of their trust. Another point is, while you're so grateful to have a roof over your head, you feel that this might be sheltering you indirectly. And if you need to add a third point in this case, maybe focus it on all the skills that you'll gain if you do move into an apartment and you are able to pay your own bills, pay your own rent, and basically come into your own as an adult. When it comes to thinking about what those 3 are, obviously I can't run through every permutation in the world, because not only does it depend on the person that you're talking to, but it also really depends on those 2 things that you wrote down at the top of the page. But I want you to really ask yourself, what are the 3 most important things to be said to get my needs and their needs in alignment? How can I think about what they want in life and what I want in life? And how can I position what I want as something that helps them get what they want? Once you've written down those 2 to 3 points, I want you to figure out in which order it makes the most sense to say them. I would highly recommend figuring out a way to start with something positive, not to be cliche and talk about the whole like positive, negative, positive, and like sandwich it. I don't think that that's the best way to approach it. I do think that the first thing that you say in this conversation will frame the culture and tone. So when it comes to what you decide to say first, it is very important to frame the conversation from a positive perspective. So if you're talking to your parent, you want to frame it through the positive perspective of everything that you've learned under their roof and how they've really helped you become someone that you know is trustworthy. If you're talking to your employer, you want to talk about how grateful you are for the opportunities, and be specific, that they've given you to develop in this area. Before you go in and say that you want a promotion or you believe that the work that you're doing warrants a promotion, you want to frame it positively through a position of gratitude, through a position of acknowledging and making them feel seen and understood regardless who it is. That's always a great way to frame it. So once you've figured out the ordering of how you're going to hit on these points, the last step before we give you a little pep talk before the conversation, the last step on this little post-it note or note section is for you to do a sweep and make sure that you are not using any defensive type language. Skim over the way that you have positioned these words and rephrase them in a way that assumes the best intent, speaks from a positive, hopeful perspective, and just leaves more room for open conversation. A good gut check here is if there's any like judgments or assumptions that you're making, that just corners people. If you think about coming in hot with your boss, like I'm feeling like I'm not being appreciated at this job, how do you know that? There might be a million other reasons that you are being underpaid. The fact is you're being underpaid, and that's okay. But to assume why you're being underpaid leaves no room for an open conversation. And don't get me wrong, you might be underappreciated. You might be undervalued. There might be some discrimination. The point I'm making here is that you gain nothing. You gain nothing by speaking to someone that can give you what you want in a defensive and even accusatory way. When you're talking to your parents, gut check it. Are you saying, I feel like you guys always just want to shelter me? Reframe that to, I think in any case when someone is living under their parents' roof, we are sheltered. Or I think in any case, while I'm still under this roof, I'm naturally just going to be sheltered by certain things. This is one of the few cases where it's okay to use passive voice. What is passive voice? I'll give you a cute little grammar lesson from my English teaching days. Passive voice is when there's not like a subject to the verb. So instead of saying, you hurt me, it says, I was hurt by this. Instead of saying, you guys are sheltering me, you are underpaying me. In this role, I do feel that I am underpaid. Based on my skills, I feel underpaid. That sounds a lot different than saying, you're underpaying me. You're not paying me enough. So I just want you to do a gut check to eliminate any judgments, any assumptions, and language that could come across confrontational or accusatory. Don't get me wrong, there's a time and place to be confrontational and maybe even accusatory, but not when you're trying to persuade someone to do something that you want them to do. After you followed all these steps, you know what you're going to talk about. I think you're maybe wondering, like, am I supposed to be reading off this thing? Let's say it's a Zoom conversation. You might be thinking, like, let me have this notes app up while I'm talking. If I'm going to get on the phone with someone, can I just read off these points? I really do not recommend that. What I recommend that you do is take the time to really kind of embody and visualize the conversation that you want to have based on these 3 points. If you need to read them over a few times to really make sure that you know what you're going to say, I absolutely recommend doing that. That being said, the points should be clear and concise enough to where you don't have to rehearse them. Like, this isn't a script that you're reading off of at all. You should be able to basically summarize each of these 3 bullets into one word: trustworthy, sheltered, adulthood. If we're going to take the parents example, right? Like, you can be able to just summarize those into one word so that when you go on to the call, you know, I'm going to hit on the fact that I'm trustworthy because you guys raised me to be trustworthy, the fact that under anyone's roof, I'm going to be sheltered, and the fact that this is my chance at adulthood and at coming into my own. However you say those, it's not always going to come out the exact way you wrote it on that Post-it note. And not only will I say that that is okay, but that is preferred, because that is how you know that you've internalized the message that you want to get across, but even more importantly, that you you have done it in a way that's authentic, because guess what? You're not a robot and you're not talking to a robot. I would hope so. I would hope this is not a conversation with an AI bot. You are talking to a human. They're going to interrupt you, laugh, smile. Like, you want to be able to be dynamic. And so once you have an understanding of what it is that you want to say, those little small talk interruptions, someone calling them in the middle of it, that's not going to throw you off, because you know exactly what it is that you want to hit on. The whole point of this post-it note is not to turn you into ChatGPT on this conversation. No. The point of this post-it note is to give you clarity about what you want and make you feel confident that your message is one that is not only clear, like I said, but is one that makes sense. This is a message that makes sense. There's a clear flow. There's a clear start and end to what I want to get out of this conversation. You've given it enough time to understand these are some valid points that I'm making that will help me illustrate to this person how what I want helps them get what they want. These 3 words just came to my mind right now, so I'm going to say them. But clarity, control, confidence. That's the whole point of this. The whole point of this video is to create clarity in your own mind about what you're trying to say, to give you the confidence to say it in a way that you're proud of, and last but not least, to make you feel like you are in control. You're in control. You're not like coming onto this conversation like a poor little victim who this person can just say and do whatever. Like, no, you decided to have this conversation. You're driving this conversation. Regardless how they do or don't react doesn't really matter, because you know what you want to say and you know how to maneuver the conversation in a way that gets you to say that. When I was in business school, I took this class called Crisis Management for Leaders or something to that effect, but we all just called it the CEO class. Real executive leaders from real businesses that had dealt with real crises coming in to model for us how they handled these crises. There's so many moments that have made headlines about these big businesses. And so we literally got to talk to the person who was in the middle of the eye of the storm. As a leader, you have to literally field all these questions and figure out how to effectively communicate in crisis. Why am I telling you all of this? Because one of the Wells Fargo execs, I don't remember his name, he basically straight up told us that the way to handle these questions is no matter what they ask you, you have 3 points that you want to hit on as a leader, because it's all political, and you find a way to make their question hit on one of the points that you want to make. So someone will hit you with, are you concerned about the ethical nature of what just happened? Da, 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 da. And let's say he wanted to say something about Wells Fargo's value system. He'll find a way to talk about Wells Fargo's values and pretend that he's answering your question, when half the time he's not really answering your question. I don't recommend being that misleading and that political, but I'm just letting you know that I did think it was very interesting that the same little tool that I use in my conversations, not to be misleading, but in fact to actually more clearly communicate my intentions and thoughts, is a tactic that these top leaders and politicians and execs use to field whatever question comes their way. They are never caught off guard. If you just literally watch any political debate, this is what they're employing. They are taking control. They're not letting people control the conversation. They're definitely not letting people control the narrative. They have a few points that they want to hit home on. They're already media trained. They're already prepared to take back that power in that moment and make sure that what they want to get across gets across and nothing else. I'm leaving you with that to encourage you to be cunning, to be strategic. There's nothing wrong with that. This does not make you less authentic unless you are using this type of tool to be less authentic. This does not make you manipulative unless you are using this tool to be manipulative. Tools are tools, and they are neither good or bad. They are just dependent on who the person is that is using them and their intention. And I really believe that. I know that this tool is in good hands because I know that your intention is to just keep your power and, yes, advocate for yourself and for the things that you want. Let me know if you have any questions about this, or if you want to see more videos on how to respond or how to handle difficult conversations. I love you so much, and as always, stay powerful, my love.